Good morning and welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about something because I see it's a growing thing. A lot of people are, in this state now where people are getting divorced and it's becoming less of a taboo. People are getting divorced for all kinds of reasons. Some people are getting divorced because it is a trend, and there are people out there who don't really know how to think for themselves and how to be stable and sincere and true to their own values and authentic within their own lives and their own personal alignment. So when things become a trend, like leaving your partner, leaving your spouse, people are going to take advantage of that. And especially if you are someone who has a platform, you have an audience, and you can get online and do the things, right? There was a content creator was online crying. And this particular take really struck me because this creator was saying whether or not they had made the right choice, and I think if you have to question, right, years after, your kids are grown, well, not grown, but older, right? And you have to question whether or not you made the right choice. You probably made the wrong choice. And I think this is important because I want to talk about this for just a moment here. We know right now there's a trend of, anti-relationships, anti-men, anti-marriage. And I'm not here to really dissect that or really give an opinion on that. But what I am saying is that people follow trends, right? If the trend right now is a blazer and minimal makeup, right, and barrel jeans, people are going to go out and buy barrel jeans, right? And it's not even because, they necessarily can't think for themselves. It's because Gap, right, and H&M and Marshalls and Burlington, right, and Louis Vuitton and Burberry and whoever else, right, is going to market you barrel jeans and blazers, right? And so that's what's going to be available on the market. And when you buy into these trends and you buy these items, right, stay with me now, don't let this go over your head, all right? You're going to garner social capital. And what is on the line right now for many of us? Community. Right? We talk about anxiety. We talk about the mental state of many of us as we engage online, as our interactions move online. But I don't think we're making it as simple as it is, right? It's really this thing of for the very first time, humans no longer have access to other humans, right? You used to be able to go to school, high school, college, right? And at least you were in community and spaces with other individuals. It was structured, right? So you weren't in spaces with 45-year-olds. The 45-year-olds weren't near the 25-year-olds. All right. And for the most part, you were in spaces where there was a shared goal. You don't have that anymore. People aren't even going to college anymore. People are doing college online. People are doing school online. Right? The wave of homeschooling, which I would push back on just a little bit because I think, when it's not childcare, even when it is childcare, I think there are just not too many people who are really equipped to do that, to have structured days, to really teach their kids and educate their kids. And then I also think when you do that, you kind of have this sort of like individuation to where, in the classroom, we're all learning math. Right? Like we're all learning the same thing. So at least we have socialization, and we don't have that anymore. Right? And so whenever there is an opportunity to create some type of momentum in socialization and to create community and garner followers and supporters, people are absolutely going to partake in what is necessary to be a part of the group. Okay. And that's going to bring about people who may not be really aligned with the group, right? But just have access to the things that bring them proxy to the group, like the blazers and the barrel jeans. Even if the barrel jeans and the blazer doesn't really fit right on them, even if it doesn't, they don't really wear the outfit, but the outfit is wearing them. Like, even if they don't really like barrel jeans. Right? Buying the barrel jeans gives them the opportunity to be in community and garner support for the rest of everybody else. And even if it's only a moment, right, or moments or hours at a time of engagement online, that's how we plug in and that is how we socialize. And so when you start thinking about that very, very basic thing of barrel jeans and blazers, right? And you take into consideration the life-altering decisions like a divorce, right? you are going to have a bit of conflation there. It's very inflated, right? Like, people were making these life-altering decisions that were not based on reality. And I don't remember his last name, but I know the name is Scott. And his quote is, mental health is the ability to see reality. Okay. And so one of the things I wanted to say, because I was I was thinking about this as I was, in my bathroom this morning, and I was like, Black people don't need, and I was thinking like, well, no, it's not Black people. Cause I was listening to NPR and it's a lot of people, right? It's not just Black people. It's people all over across the thing. But I speak mostly to Black people cause I'm an African-American woman, and, it just kind of resonates that way. And I think just even when people speak in general, I mean, I don't really want to get into that because that's a whole nother dynamic, and that's a little bit more complex. And it's going to take me some time to explain why I think white audiences don't necessarily need to say it, but why it may reach Black people or other persons, right? I don't really, and it's not just going to be the grand, the grand scheme of like white supremacy. That's not really why it is. It's a myriad of factors of why when white Americans have platforms and they speak, they can do so freely, maybe with the expectancy to reach other people. I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. And I just don't want us to lose sight of this podcast because I'm not trying to be on here all day, right? I mean, not all day. I actually don't mind talking, but that just wasn't my plan today. So there's a lot of reasons for that. And if you want me to expound upon those reasons, leave a comment below on my YouTube channel, Books and Good Looks, okay? And I will be more than happy to make another video to expound upon why, white creators have a different type of reach and, what I think is really behind that. So moving along, right? I think persons, right? Because I do believe that they're saying now, right, the poverty level is like 70 or 40,000, right? 40,000, 45,000, something like that. Less than 50, right? And when you realize how common that is, right? Because when you were young, because I'm literally in the late phases of my 20s. Like I'm actually going to be entering up out of the 20s club here shortly. But when you're younger, you think, your parents got a lot of money. Right. And maybe if you realize that you guys aren't like rich, you also realize that the bills are being paid. Right. If that was your household and you were blessed. Right. You realize that the bills are being paid. Food was being on the table. Like it was all provided for. Right. But like as you get older, you start to realize like, oh, my parents make, $40,000, $50,000 a year. How are they doing it? Right. Like and you start to realize that your parents aren't rich, and you start to realize that there are a lot of people who are just working class. Right. And so I think when working class people start making decisions like getting a divorce, I don't think that we are counting the cost. Right. And I say we because I'm part of the working class. Right. So I'm not talking down or, I'm like right here with you guys. And I'm just saying from my own personal observances. And we're not counting the cost. Now, I don't know anything about influencer money. Let me just say that. OK, because to this day, I'm still very skeptical. Because I often just, me personally, that's just the type of person I am. I've always been skeptical, when model agencies were popping up when I was around like 21 and they were like, yeah, you should model, you should do this, you should do that. There was this agency called New View, and it was local, and a lot of people were kind of going to this agency, and it never really seemed to amount to anything, right? Like I never heard of New View's models getting like, talent management from like Wilhelmina or, New York. Like there was really not anything about this type of agency. And a lot of these agencies that were popping up at the time where we were telling young, beautiful girls to be models, right? Like that was how you're going to get out of, a small town. And I just didn't believe it. I was always very skeptical of it. And, getting older, kind of following the agencies, none of their models ever really amounted to anything, right? Also think too, there was always kind of like this pushback that I had in regards to certain things like modeling. And you can, take that and take that with every other industry, which I'm going to say influencer industry as well, right? Creator economy. Because I just never really I'm going to be honest with you, and maybe, you might call me a cynic, but I just never really believed that was possible, right? Like that was the way. I never believed that you can just do a little bit of nothing and get something. I just never believed that. And I always felt as though there was some level of, this loss of autonomy that you were inevitably going to experience if you hand your life over, right, to this agency and you're this poor, 20 something and you're trying to make it, right? I think that to me, it always felt like a very unfair imbalance, because here you were so hungry, right, for an opportunity. And I just think that it was just I didn't have the articulation at the time, but I felt that imbalance. And I just knew that somewhere along the way, there was going to be some exploitation at my personal expense, because I didn't have anything, right? Here I am, hungry, desiring to be in community and to be, scouted, model or whatever, for this agency, right? So quite naturally, I was going to be willing to do more. And, so I never wanted to go down that path. And so I'm not going to say that influencer economy is the same, but what I am going to say is that it never really made sense to me personally. One, I think the most successful influencers, and I'm kind of diving into this because I want you to just follow me for a moment. And I know I don't, like I said, I don't want to expound upon a lot, but I do want to be clear, and I am going to lead us somewhere. So I just want to explain to you why I never believed in this and my own personal skepticisms. Don't turn off the podcast, right? If you are someone who's trying to be an influencer, I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking your path. I'm just stay with me. Stay here. Okay. So it never made sense to me, right? The influencers who did make it were people of bachelor's degrees, right? A lot of times I felt like they were, bachelor's degrees, or they were in network with other famous people, right? They, were individuals who were in, very, big metropolitan, cities like New York, Chicago, LA, right? So there's a lot of aesthetic there, a lot of resources, a lot of connections. And so there were just some similarities that I was finding, right, New York. I think I said that already, but there were just a lot of similarities that I was finding amongst some of the most successful creators. When they would go to share their stories, they would talk about how, their parents really poured into them, how they were able to go into Ivy League, and really how they had been working towards something, right, for their entire lives. Some of the creators who weren't as successful in that mean were either people who have been on YouTube for 10 years prior, right, starting in 2008, 2007. And it just so happened that just through the years of, diligence and study and discipline, right, they've learned how to really market, right, in the digital market, in the digital economy. So it's like kind of like paying dividends at this point, right? And so there were just some similarities that I was finding across some of the most successful influencers. And so when I would see people who were saying like, yeah, I'm going to quit my corporate job, right? I'm a Black woman, I'm a Black man, and I've worked so hard for this position at this company, and I'm doing very well for myself. And, I was able to get in here through my fraternity or through my sorority. And, people have really paved the way for me to do this. And I want to be a content creator. And, they're having fun. They're partaking in these things, and they're showing off all of these designer things and stuff. And, it just never really made sense to me, because it's like, okay, if we're saying that content creators make all this money, where's the money coming from? Where's the money going, right? Because me personally, someone constantly showing like designer bags and all of that is not wealth. And the reason being that it's not wealth is because you can find designer bags very cheap these days. I mean, there's so many different sites, right? You've got The Real. I know that's one. I don't buy like designer bags, but I just know that it's not that, like, having a Chanel bag is not a taboo anymore, right? You can literally get on a bidding site and get it for like $300. You know what I mean? $200. Like, it's not a thing anymore, right? eBay, like, it's not a thing anymore. People were, starting to be in connections and finding, the real dealer, right? In China, some people were traveling to China, right, to get these bags. And so designer was no longer this aspirational thing or this status indicator that says, okay, this is someone who has money, right? It didn't matter anymore because it was easily accessible now. In addition to that, looking at these creators, and it was like, okay, so, they're going on these trips and things like that, but the trips are paid and they're funded for by the brands, so it's like, what money is in the creator economy that would influence many people to leave their families, quit their real jobs that they have worked their entire lives, or at least part of their lives for, right? In this economy, in Trump's economy, in AI economy, right? To go and be an influencer. Right. And I'm going to tell you, and this is where it's going to be a little somber. All right. A little somber. And I'm not judging. And honestly, I'm having these conversations because I think it's important, but I also am having these conversations because this is what people put online. So I do think, I'm not here to judge anybody. That's not what this is about. And I honestly feel like me saying that is what's going to make it feel like judgment. But I'm not, but I do think when we share certain things online, I think we do open ourselves up for judgment. And I don't think it's no different than a celebrity. If you ask me, I think trying to be an influencer is low key like trying to be a celebrity, right? You're trying to garner some level of fame and this level of influence. So it's the same thing. And we know that when people put themselves in that space, right, you're going to be subject to criticism. So anyway, and so I'm seeing these people quitting their jobs. And one creator that really struck me, was this creator who spoke about their divorce and how they had a stable life, and they just weren't happy, and it just wasn't working. And, they wanted to, really, there really was no, like, obviously maybe, they tailored the story. We don't know, but there really was no rhyme or reason, and it made me realize how many people were being influenced to make these life-altering decisions. And we weren't having the real sober conversations about what reality looks like to be a single parent, right? There are people who have managed to feed the algorithm aspiration, who have studied what it is to be somebody who inspires other people, right? Who influences other people. And they've been able to take very real hardships and market it in a way that flattens the reality, that flattens the complexity, right? But highlights why there's so much freedom in this path, right? And what we don't take into consideration is that this person hasn't been able to do what they do because they want to make money. They want to make money. They have to make money, and based on where they are in their lives, they have to sell you some type of dream, right? So that you will follow them and you will support them. But it's not true. And I think because we are all online seeking some level of escapism, because that's what entertainment has always been, right? We easily buy into these ideas. We easily buy into these lifestyles that don't actually exist. And so it's really, really sobering when you think about how someone would uproot their family, man or woman, because it happens on both ends, right? To take a chance on perpetual adolescence, right? Because I think if you ask me, people who are continuously chasing dreams are children, period. They're adults who just haven't grown up, man or woman. I said what I said. All right. We can have hobbies. We can have things that we love. But at the end of the day, the bills are due. The rent is due. The rent is due. The mortgage is due. We got kids. We got bills, like we grown. Right. And one of the things that our culture does, and that's one of the reasons why I think for many Americans, like, we are impoverished because it's a rare thing to lock in and to really handle your business, right? This is a country that really, really incentivizes youth, right? This is why you have elders, people who don't want to age, right? It's not about looking good, taking care. No, it's just people who don't want to age, people who don't want to mature, people who don't want to grow up. Like, if you have multiple children, this is not the time for you to be out here leaving your partner, leaving your foundation, leaving your spouse, leaving your children, all right, to go and pursue a dream. You got to grow up. And that's a sobering reality. And so what I was saying in the beginning of the video, and I know I've said a lot, but like, when you're living under that, like 50, like it's not very comfortable for you. You're average, most of us, all of us, all right? Average, peer-to-peer, okay? Hardworking, class citizen, all right? And when you decide to get married and hop, skip, and jump yourself, you are putting yourself in your future, your finances, everything in jeopardy, okay? Everything is up in jeopardy. You are not about to get out here and ride in the sunset. I'm sorry. That's a lie. And I know you're inspired by the white woman who was able to do that, but she didn't tell you that she married a freaking neurosurgeon, and she's not telling you that because it's normal for her. You know what I mean? Like she went to Pratt, she went to, you know what I mean? Hello. See, this is the thing too. We get, as African American people specifically, we get in these integrated spaces and we admire the ease. We admire that there is some level of relatability after being in this country for years, when we've been told that there is no relatability to, white Americans, and we want a piece of that. But it's complex and it's not easily accessible. If it was easily accessible, we would all be doing it. And so I think for the Black community, more specifically in regards to marriage, it's more than that. You're handing your life, your future over to the state that does not favor you. I'm sorry. Yeah, the state that does not favor you. This is not going to go well. This is not going to go well for you. You're not going to be able to just hop, skip, and jump right into another. And even still, what I don't understand, and maybe this is me. Let me be mindful of what I say before I say it. Hold on. I don't think people realize the baggage that comes from being divorced, right? Like, this is not me poo-pooing on anybody, but it is to say that, like, it's baggage. Can we be fair? When you have kids, like, priors from relationships, like, it's baggage. And the thing that really interests me about people who do find other individuals to partner with them and marry them with children is, like, there's no humility. And I'm not saying you have to beg anybody to be with you, but, like, I don't know what it is about some people. And I think just, again, this influencer culture today, and I'm not talking about men or women. I'm just speaking blatantly about men and women, right? I don't get people who have this type of attitude of like you're really it, And again, hear me out, because this is not about worth. All right. Inherently, we are all worthy, period. But I do think that in our inability to mature, right? Because when you're young, you want to be the it. You want to be the it girl. You want to be the it boy. You think you're him. You know what I mean? When you're young, you're him. You know what I mean? When you're young, you're her, right? And like when you're constantly seeing that online with a bunch of 20-year-olds who are young in TikTok, like that type of stuff influences your thinking and how you see yourself, just because you can relate to the message. But you're at a different stage in your life, and that message no longer applies to you. You see what I'm saying? And it's like when you get older and you become an adult, like it's not about being it. You know what it's about? It's about making sure you wake up and eat an apple today. Cut you up some apples, some peanut butter for a snack. It's about putting away the hot Cheetos. It's about eating breakfast. Get you a couple pieces of sausage links. All right. Get you nice sausage patties. All right. Get you some oatmeal. All right. The kind you got to sit on the stove and boil and get away from the instant. Like, that's what it's about when you get older. It's about humility. Life quite naturally slows you down, and it should be making us more aware, more conscious of the things that matter. This is the part where you start to worry about systems. This is the part where you start to care about the government and get up and go vote, right? For the midterms. Like that's what it is to get older. You shouldn't still be trying to be on top. You're not on top. You're getting older. You're not on top. You know what I mean? And I think for so many people, once you settle into stability and routine and structure, it's not exciting. And it can feel like depression, right? Because you know what it forces you to do? You know what maturity forces you to do? It forces you to face the world. When you're young, all you have is dreams, hopes, ambitions. But when you settle into a structure like marriage, you start to realize that you actually can't do everything. And yes, maybe because you're a parent now and you have a spouse and you have responsibility, but most importantly, you know what it really is really showing you, right? That's actually a lot more sober than pointing the finger at one another. It's actually showing you that you were never going to make it anyway. You know why you were never going to make it anyway? Because this is your life. In Idaho, African American, 43K. You know what I mean? Like, you were never going to make it anyway. And it's not to say that you were never capable. It's to say that you never had a chance, sweetie. You never had a chance, sir. You know what I mean? To take a chance like that and to live that. And you know why that's so sobering and it sounds so harsh? It's because as Black people, Oh my God, we are fed dreams. We are fed so many dreams about how we're going to make it, how we're going to do this, how we're going to be famous, how we're going to boop-de-boop-de-boop, how we're going to build this fashion business, how we're going to do all these things. But the reality for many of us, we don't have the resources to do that. There's a white little girl I followed back in the day. Honey, her father, owned some type of building up in freaking New York State, honey. That's old money, right? 1980s, Wall Street, whoop-de-whoop, like old money. Okay? Got a whole business on the second floor. Like, these are the dreams that we aspire to. And it was never about you not getting that because you weren't worthy. It was never about you not trying. But what happens is sometimes we try and we just don't succeed, y'all. Like Langston Hughes, what happens to the dream deferred? What happens to the dream deferred, my people? What happens is that we dream a new dream. We dream a new dream and we grieve the dream. And we also grieve and we mourn for other people. And we start to have we start to have compassion for other African American people because we realize that we're not the only ones who didn't get it. We're not the only ones who didn't obtain it. All right. Sometimes it's the economics and it's the market and it's the timing. Right. And then sometimes it's just life. And you start to realize that you couldn't do it even if you wanted to do it because you don't have the type of structure. Not everybody has that type of like drive to where they just want to be working crazy hours and living with all this instability. Because I'm going to be honest with you, as much as people glamorize entrepreneurship, it's very unstable. You're constantly on edge, wondering when you're going to lose it. If you're managing right, trying to enjoy a little bit of this, having to be very structured, having to do a lot of things by yourself, and even to build that type of bandwidth, even within yourself, takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of couple years for people to kind of like stabilize. So I'm not here to knock anybody's dreams. Y'all know that I'm on here pursuing my dreams. Well, I don't know. When I think about dreams, let me just say this, right? When I think about dreams, I think dreams are a thing that children, or sometimes as adults, right, we hold on to and we cling to when we cannot face reality. Right. And I think being an adult is learning how to face reality. And I think when you become an adult and you face reality, you learn how to dream with your eyes wide open. Right. And so that's, how much do I make? Where am I? What are my responsibilities? What are my priorities? Right. Okay. Where am I located? What is geographically right within reach? What are the resources around me? What is tangible? What is realistic? Right? What are some tangible, measurable goals I can set? Not, I'm just going to take a chance and do no. What are some smart goals, smart, measurable, obtainable, and timely goals, right, that I can set that are going to help me bring about whatever change I'm trying to see in my life. All right. And, me personally, I think I used to cling to certain dreams of being this writer in New York and, working for New York Times, like most journalists, right? Because it was about identity. I wasn't really sure of who I was, but I think as you get older, you start to realize that your identity is not tied to who you could be, but like who you are. And I think it's a very hard thing to kind of love yourself and, really be content with who you are when you realize that you are average in comparison to everybody else, right? If you're constantly this young person sort of maybe chasing some childhood trauma or trying to heal some childhood wound of, being special and having this level of superiority, which this one's a little complex, right? Especially for Black kids. This one's a little complex. So I'm not going to be insensitive when I say that. But I do think that a lot of times people who really can't let go of a dream and who can't let go of trying to be famous and quote unquote, like make it, I think that they are stunted, relationally because they're not mature enough to see reality, right? And I'm trying to speak the truth in love. I hope I'm being clear. But anyway, I just think before you get married, depending on how much money you make, where you're located, all the things, right? Your family structure, your family system. This is not about pointing a finger or talking about how this person is that, this person is that, right? I think if you, hard working class people, for the most part, not even that, right? It's athletes, multimillionaires whose parents are still struggling with drugs and addictions and things like that. So I think when you got to take into consideration, like just the reality of the African-American state of people and the previous generations and how addictions and imperfect families, right, run it's pretty prevalent in many of our lives, right? It's not just, oh, this is a sad, soppy person who comes from a bad home. No. And the only reason we feel that way about ourselves is because, again, we're comparing ourselves to the white people, right, that we're seeing online who are coming from wealth, So I don't know, y'all. I just think before you are influenced as an African-American, hard-working class individual to make any type of life-altering decision, I'm going to ask you to consider your influence. I'm going to ask you to consider your influence, and I'm going to ask you to take some time to connect with your reality before you make a move, right? Take the time to strip away from all of the influence, and I'm going to ask you to look at your reality. Look at it very realistic, and I'm going to ask you to consider before you make a decision that could potentially alter your life and have some very real consequences. And even though I found myself, y'all know I told y'all my story, I still don't think that everybody needs to be getting a divorce. And I still don't think that, it calls for everybody to get a divorce. I just don't think so. And I don't think a lot of people should get married. I also don't think that either. You know what I mean? You should only get married if you are an individual who has accepted reality. You can see reality clearly, right? I think you need to have an understanding of African-American history. That's just me personally, because I think you need to know what dynamics you're dealing with in your life and your relationship. I think too many Black people get into relationships expecting their partners to have white wealth and to have white mannerisms and to have white resources and support systems and structures. And when you operate like that, you're going to be very disappointed. All right. So there's that. And you need to be somebody who's mature, right? If you're still chasing dreams, you're still trying to, you're still chasing dreams. You're not ready to get married. You got to be on the ground, willing to build something, right? And like I said, hard working class people, just take that in consideration, because it's going to be hard for you, right? You may not already have support and resources and things like that, and so. Just take those things into consideration. That goes both ways, because you're going to take a hit. You know what I mean? It's not going to be giving young and free, because that's one thing about it. When you get the state involved, all right, it's no longer about feelings and intentions and whoop-de-whoop, all that other stuff that doesn't really matter. Now we're dealing with A and B, black and white, right? Quite literally sometimes. So just take those things into consideration. Just really take those things into consideration. And most importantly, I'm going to end by encouraging all of you to really sit and ask yourself, where do I get my sense of self from? Do I get my sense of self from, I'm not even going to go down the examples, but just ask yourself, where do I really derive a sense of self? What is the thing that really keeps my self-esteem afloat? Is it chasing superiority on some level to feel famous and better and good about myself and to feel visible? Is it visibility? Is that where I get my sense of self? Do I get my sense of self from, maybe being in the church, but being somebody who feels as though it's all about religion and it's about how people perceive me? Or is it in the quiet? Is it when nobody is looking? Is it being, righteous when the camera is not on? Right? Where do I get my sense of self? Do I get my sense of self from masquerading like I'm this multimillionaire when I'm not? When that's not my reality? Where am I getting my sense of self? Because I think for a lot of people today, and obviously I'm going to speak to African-American people, you have to ask yourself, where am I really getting my sense of self? I just think that a lot of people are really deriving a sense of self from, y'all know what it always comes back to, but being popular, being seen, and it doesn't mean you can't have a good life. It doesn't mean you're not worthy. It's just, you just have to mature. We got to grow. And we have to mature, and we have to move beyond that. That's one thing they're going to do. That's one thing they're going to do. And that's one thing that, America is going to do. It's going to sell you a dream, right? Because if you're living in poverty, you got to have some type of dream to get out of poverty, right? And for the young kids who don't, who are struggling, young kids, babies, not babies, but young kids, right? The only way to see a better future is to dream of being a basketball player, dream of being a model. You know what I mean? But it gets to a point where, okay, we got to realize, okay, here we are, and we grown now. And we don't have to dream of getting out of this situation because we're young and we're hopeless and we can't make any money. Now we're grown, we're an adult. This is what it is. This is what I got. You know what I mean? You may never be rich, but how can I make the most of what I got? What's a good life? What's a rich life? What are some skills I can learn? Is it cooking? Is it gardening? Is it biking? Is it buying bikes and restoring bikes? You know, I'm just thinking of some ideas, but like, you know how men always say, you know, we don't work with our hands anymore. And we'll do, is it doing that? Maybe you could start a bike shop and fix the kids' bikes in the city so they can get to and from the store. So they ain't got to be carjacking. All right. Maybe you could start repairing old bikes for these kids, working on it with your hands day and night. All right. Helping these kids get to and fro from to school or wherever they got to go. So they ain't got to be out here carjacking. Maybe that's what it is. Kids don't even ride bikes no more. I don't even be seeing bikes. But you know what? Bikes is expensive. Talk about it. Now we talking about reality. You know, maybe it's not, y'all ain't gonna have a big house as a married family. Maybe you guys are never gonna be rich, but you can still enjoy a good meal. You can enjoy each other's company. We can be kind to one another, even if neither one of us got to fulfill the dream. Black people, black husband, black wife. All right. We can still respect one another because we understand that the cards wasn't shaped for us anyway. Right. We understand that wealth wasn't guaranteed for us anyway. We can still work at it. All right. But we can be kind. We can be respectful. All right. We can appreciate the company and the goodness of one another while we work to try to acquire. But even if we fall short, at least we tried. At least we have compassion and respect and understanding for one another. At least we weren't alone at it. At least we weren't alone with it. So we got to grow up. Peace.